Right, we're ready to start. So welcome everyone. Today is the Kubernetes SIG PM intro meeting. And my name is Ihor Dvoretskyi. I'm a developer advocate at CNCF. I'm one of the colleagues of SIG PM and one of the co-founders of SIG PM. And together with me is Aparna Sinha from Google. We'll speak a bit about, first of all, we'll take a look at about to the features in the press release. We'll take a look at what we're moving to forward. And at the end of the session, we'll also have some Q&A session and some interaction with you. Would like to receive your feedback about Kubernetes and the current movement of Kubernetes as a product.
Yeah, we're happy to have a discussion, but I think we first want to introduce what the SIG is.
Right.
Well, how many of you don't know SIG PM, and how many of you don't know what it is? Is there anybody who doesn't know what SIG PM is? Okay, one person, 2 people, all right, 3 people, all right. And we've actually recently changed the charter of SIG PM. So let us just give an introduction. We are looking for folks that want to join the SIG.
Right, yeah. So we're going to make a brief introduction, a brief history about SIG PM. So initially it was the working group that has been established around 2 years ago by a few people within the community who had the main goal of codifying and making Kubernetes more consistent as not only the open source project, but also as a solid product with moving Kubernetes as a solid code base and a solid product for the end users and for other Kubernetes vendor and market players. And we've been working as a working group around half a year. After that, we switched to the SIG format, being more formalized, being more codified, and having our own place in the Kubernetes ecosystem. So on this slide, you can see how the Kubernetes community is organized. So here we see a few vertical groups that are focused on some components, like technical components of Kubernetes, for example, SIG that is focused on application development on running applications of top of Kubernetes is called SIG apps. Some areas, for example, networking and storage are covered by SIG networking, SIG storage, and other SIGs. But we are the project-wide SIG. We, together with the SIG release, SIG contributor experience, SIG doc, SIG testing, SIG architecture, we are working on the entire scope of Kubernetes as a project. So we're primarily focused on working on the roadmap, on the features, and on the related areas of Kubernetes.
And we should probably explain what the PM stands for. The PM is kind of an all-encompassing term. It means product management. It also means project management and program management. So we do a combination of activities that range from helping to define the roadmap to working on the release to helping to manage the program. And that's why we're a horizontal SIG that works across all of the technical areas. The verticals are the technical areas.
Right. So initially we've been formed as the Product Management Working Group and Product Management SIG, but now with the new charter, we'd like to extend the area where we're working on and in which areas we can offer our support for the community. And that's exactly, as Aparna mentioned, it's not only product area, but also program management and project management.
How many of you here are developers? 2. And are there any product or program managers? Okay.
Enough.
Great. So we actually have both types or any type of function participate in SIG PM. So we have had developers, engineers, actually some of the lead maintainers of the project that participate in SIG PM. And then we've also had program managers and project managers. This is a SIG which is inviting and has interesting contribution for anyone from any background. So if you're looking to make a contribution to the Kubernetes project, this is a good way to get involved.
Right. Even if you're a marketing person, we also have the deep interaction with the CNCF marketing and, excuse me. Okay. Yeah, so we also have the strict interaction with the marketing people representing some vendors and CNCF. With the Redefine portfolio, we have actually highlighted what we are going to work on, and the new charter is available on GitHub. It's currently in the stage of proposal. We've been discussing it during the last few months within the community and during almost every SIG PM meeting, and now it's available for you to review. You can simply open this link and take a look what we're headed to these days. So speaking about the major points, we are currently formally renamed to SIG PM because, as I mentioned before, we've been originally the SIG Product Management. Now we are focused on also not only on the product side, but also on the program and project management side. And yeah, so the major bullet points, again, the link is here.
Yeah, some of the things, I'll just add to that, particularly that specific activities that we do as a group. For every release, we try and create a backlog of features that will be in that release. And it really helps the community to get visibility about what's coming in that release early on in the release. Obviously, by the end of the release, everybody knows what's in the release, but early on in the release. And it's an open process, so anyone, even from outside, can see, okay, 1.10, 1.11, here's the features that are going to be landing in that release. And we keep up with it. So during the course of the release, we keep up with the SIGs. Sometimes we even see demos to see if that feature is actually landing or not. That's one piece. The second piece, which is actually more marketing related, is that we help to write the blog and all of the press updates about a particular release. And that's kind of a complicated process because usually there are 50, 60 features in the release. And some of them, by the way, even the first piece of creating the backlog, it is such a broad project that it's like herding cats to get everything into the backlog. A lot of things are flying under the radar. And then the marketing piece of writing the blog and communicating what's in the release to the press is actually very difficult to do because you have to take all of this technical content and figure out what of this technical content is actually relevant and then explain it in a way that makes sense from a use case perspective for a user and also is meaningful to communicate to the press and others. So yeah, if you're a technical marketing person or if any of that surface area excites you, this might be something that you would enjoy doing.
Right. So a few notes about SIG PM itself. So the README is available on GitHub. Here's a short link to it. In the README, you may find all the detailed information about the SIG. How often do we meet? We actually meet every Tuesday at 4 p.m. UTC time, or as far as I remember,
every other Tuesday.
Yeah, every other Tuesday. And we have a few chairs. There's myself, Aparna, Caleb Miles from Google, and we have Jace Dumars, who is here in the audience, who is driving the program management sub-project. So we'll also take a look at 1 to 10 highlights. The major features that have been there. So Kubernetes 1.10 was the first release in the current year, and we had around 25 new features. Comparing to the previous releases that we had in the previous year, the 25 new features is a relatively small number, and that's caused mostly because in 1.10 release, the main focus of the community was not only on developing some extremely new functionality, but on enhancing the existing features. So many features that have been delivered in Kubernetes 1.10 were enhancements of the previous features that have been delivered before.
Yeah. Just one thing to add with regard to features, managing features, making sure that they're in the backlog, and instituting sort of new processes around, say, a stability release or an innovation release. These are things that are very project management oriented, and so we're always looking for folks that are good at process and can improve the process. So that's one thing to keep in mind.
Right, right. And again, in Kubernetes 1 to 10, we had a few major areas of enhancements and a few major areas where the entire Kubernetes community is moving towards. If you saw the keynote that Aparna made today about Kubernetes movement as a project, you could notice a few major items there. I will just highlight that we are moving towards the enhancing Kubernetes storage and workload stability, extensibility of Kubernetes with allowing you as a developer to develop some new functionality on top of Kubernetes, for example, with CRDs. And also we are moving towards the Spark machine learning and other big data.
Yeah, one of the exciting things of doing the type of work that Ihor and I and Jace do is that you do get that bird's eye view of the project, and you get that bird's eye view release after release after release. So we have a release every 3 months, like clockwork, 4 releases a year, and we get to see everything that's happening in the community. That's how, for example, I'm able to give a keynote that talks about all of the features. And it's rare. Most people that contribute to Kubernetes are contributing in their specific area, specific technical area, and they don't necessarily have a good grasp of everything that's happening in the project. And so they're not in as good a position to, for example, shape that and talk to users and get feedback and really kind of guide the project as well. So that's one thing that's been actually very rewarding about the work that we're doing.
Right. Coming back to the features, it's not highlighted on this slide, but just to mention, if you're not aware of Kubernetes features process, we have 3 major categories of features. There are alpha features, beta features, and GA or stable features. So alpha features are some brand new features with experimental functionality that are really not ready for the real production usage, but they are showing their effort within the community where we're moving to.
And they're usually the most exciting features because they're brand new.
Right.
And they're usually breaking new ground.
Exactly. Beta features are more mature X-alpha features that currently have bigger stability compared to the alpha stage, but sometimes it's also not necessary for you if you're running some precise or real production workload for you to use the beta features. But at the same time, usually beta features are enabled by default.
And and you'll find a lot of beta features in production in almost all Kubernetes deployments.
Right. And GA feature is the typical feature that is covered by SLA. For example, if you are a Kubernetes provider, you can cover the GA feature with some SLA. It's stable enough to be used in any type of workload, even some real enterprise-grade production use cases, and so on.
And we have a long-term deprecation policy and API stability associated with GA features.
Correct, yeah. All right. So now is the time for interaction.
Well, are we going to go through what's in 1.10, or that's it?
That's enough, I suppose.
Oh, okay. So we're not talking about CSI and.
Well, I can highlight a few.
Local storage.
Yeah, we can highlight.
Are folks interested in hearing about the technical details of what's in 1.10? Raise your hands if you're interested.
Okay, perfect.
Maybe you do a deep dive.
Yeah, I can make not a real deep dive because we have the different sessions here at KubeCon that are making the real deep dive into these areas. But I'll highlight the major bullet points about these features. So speaking about storage, one of the major features that has been delivered in Kubernetes 1.10 is CSI enablement as a beta feature. CSI, if you are not aware of, CSI is the container storage interface that allows you to.
Do you want me to bring up a slide? Show it? Picture?
No, that's enough. Yeah.
Right.
So CSI is the container storage interface that allows you, if you're a storage vendor, for example, and if you are developing some storage functionality for Kubernetes, it will be much easier for you to develop your storage product with the well-defined interface in mind. So CSI is not only the technical implementation, but it's also the set of specification that defines for you how should the storage implementation on top of Kubernetes should look like. Also, if you are using Kubernetes and you are interested in using multiple or different storage providers for Kubernetes cluster, you can, with CSI, your life will be much easier. So you can simply select one implementation for your desired storage provider and use it there.
So the motivation for CSI was that obviously Kubernetes is a platform that we want to be able to run anywhere. And when you get on-premise, there's a variety of different storage technologies that enterprises use. And it was getting pretty unwieldy to support all of these different types of storage plugging into Kubernetes because all of the adapters were in tree. And so they needed to follow the cycle and they needed to be part of the code base. By defining an interface, the container storage interface, which SIG storage has been working on, it's possible to do out-of-tree plugins for Kubernetes. And the interesting thing about the CSI is actually it's not just Kubernetes. It actually spans other container orchestrators. So I believe also Mesos and Docker and Cloud Foundry
yeah.
all are supporting the CSI. And so it's really kind of an industry-wide specification for how to plug in storage into container orchestrators. Kubernetes obviously being the largest of those.
Yeah.
And so this is currently in beta in the 1.10 release.
Right, it's in beta in 1.10 release and it's enabled by default if you're using Kubernetes 1.10. Another big feature in the storage area is enablement of the local volumes. So previously, if you've been using Kubernetes and you would like to use some volumes functionality, that meant that you had to use some network attached storage if you'd like to use it as a local storage. But today, you can use the real physically attached local volumes and local storage to your Kubernetes cluster. It's not really intended to store some precise data there, but if, for example, you have the use case of SSD caching or similar, you can use that feature.
Yeah, of caching. And local storage was a big request once we started to make stateful applications a common citizen in Kubernetes. And as you know, stateful application support moved to GA in the 1.8 release. And actually on GKE, the stat that I like to throw out is more than 40% of clusters are running stateful applications. The most popular ones being Redis and Elasticsearch. And then there's more coming like Cassandra and others. And so a lot of our users started asking for local storage for higher performance for these stateful applications. And that has been a huge ask. And I think it's now in beta in the 1.10 release.
Right, correct.
There's a lot of caveats to using local storage. It doesn't pretend to be as resilient as network attached storage. And so if your node goes away, you have to read the fine print. But it is available.
Right. So another area where we are moving with the major features in this release is extensibility, and CRD and API aggregation are one of the most important features here. So CRDs is an ability for you to develop some third-party applications and third-party resources using the existing API of Kubernetes. And probably have heard a recent announcement from one of the biggest contributors to Kubernetes about enablement of the operators framework. And you also mentioned the
I actually gave a demo of it this morning in my keynote with the Spark operator.
Yes.
So the Spark operator is a custom controller. So you write a custom controller for your particular application. We intend to use this, of course, for stateful applications to make it easier to run stateful applications. So you have a custom controller, and then you have the custom resource definition, which is a definition that is given to the API server. And the combination of those two allow you to extend the Kubernetes API in whatever way you want. And obviously, it has many, many, many uses, but application support is one of them.
Right, correct. And another area is
so CRDs actually are still beta in 1.10 release,
yes.
and API aggregation moved to GA.
Yeah. If you've been using Kubernetes before, by the way, if you had experience with Kubernetes versions, as far as I remember, 1.5, the equivalent to CRD was called third-party resources, but it was later deprecated. It was still available during the few releases, but now with Kubernetes 1.10, it's finally deprecated. And if you had experience of running some third-party resources, you had enough time to migrate to CRD. That's actually one of the greatest samples of how do we follow the deprecation policy of the features in Kubernetes. And the final area is about the big data, Spark, and machine learning. So again, Aparna has
I did the demo on this
yeah,
on the
Aparna
Spark piece.
did the demo, so we won't repeat that. Also speaking about ML, machine learning, there are enough activity within the community, and there are also the related communities and related projects. For example, Kubeflow, that is one of the most popular projects today.
And also for ML, we've been working on hardware support, hardware accelerator support. So a lot of device plugin work that also was part of the 1.10 release. Just having given that view of the features in 1.10, I think it's worth pointing out which SIGs were responsible for a lot of the feature work in this release. So obviously SIG storage, very active SIG. And as we look out to the roadmap for the rest of this year, continues to be a very active SIG with more support for local storage, with more support for other plugins, with finalizing and bringing to GA the CSI standard, across the community. So SIG storage is one that has a lot of activity. And then SIG Big Data, actually it's a little bit grayed out, but SIG Big Data is the one that's been working on Spark. And that activity is of course, now maturing. And then SIG Apps is the one that's working on all of the operators. So you'll expect to have more operators for things like Cassandra and Redis and other things. SIG Node is always active. I think now particularly active in the area of sandbox containers and the container runtime initiative, or the container runtime interface. SIG Cluster Lifecycle is working on deploying Kubernetes, making that easier, and is working on a downward API to make it standard to basically cluster resources underneath Kubernetes. Any others that we want to point out? There's a number of working groups that have come up. Those are the ones in green. Those are actually, most of them, recent additions to the project. So we just want to point out some of the hot areas where, if you're looking to get involved, those are areas of a lot of activity. SIGAuth, with all of the security roadmap features.
Right. Do you have anything to add about Kubernetes 1.10, or would you like to move forward?
I think we're good.
Perfect. So let's move now to the interaction phase. So we have a few questions to you if you're using Kubernetes, if you have an experience with Kubernetes, we'd like to receive your feedback.
Yeah, well, actually, maybe we relay some of the feedback first. We spoke to, if you went to the opening keynote yesterday, I think it was Dan Cohen. He talked about the end user community of the CNCF. So the CNCF has actually got 35 member companies that are users of the open source projects, primarily actually Kubernetes. And that's a tremendous resource that we've been leveraging to get feedback about the roadmap of Kubernetes and how Kubernetes is helping and where it's not yet helping. So we spoke to them recently, Ihor and Jason and I, and we gathered some feedback about what are the features or what are the capabilities, the value proposition of Kubernetes that is really resonating and that is really panning out in your company. And we heard three things. These might surprise you. Actually, why don't we play bingo? Let me ask this. How many people think that it was deployment velocity? Raise your hand if you think deployment velocity was one of them. Okay, 2 people. Okay, that doesn't seem to be the majority. How many people think that it was the fact that Kubernetes makes their application portable, that it's multi-cloud? That's the big benefit that they were getting out of it. Okay, 2 people. Okay, how many people think that it was predictability? Nobody. How many people think that it was efficiency? And here we're really talking about utilization and efficiency of the underlying infrastructure. Okay, one person. How many people think it was security? It's just much more secure. I get isolation from running containers. No. Okay. And then access to innovation. Okay, interesting. Cool. So what we heard, and it's a select sample. I mean, it's 35 companies, but it's it's big companies. It's companies like big and small, actually. Goldman Sachs and eBay and New York Times and so forth.
Spotify, for example.
And Spotify.
Made a keynote today as well.
Yes. The number one thing the benefit that was pointed out to us was efficiency. Utilization. So yes, okay. So you win. I don't know what you win. You win a sticker.
We don't have any gifts.
Yes. Efficiency. I was a little bit surprised, but yeah, one of the end users said that they went from VMs to using Kubernetes. They were a startup, and they went from 4 to 5% 5% utilization to 90% utilization. I'm not sure if I really believe them, but 90% utilization of the underlying resources, that's huge. But everyone seemed to agree that by going to Kubernetes, I guess they are really truly bin packing and densely packing their containers into their infrastructure. So that's one. I mean, and that's a cost saving that goes to your bottom line. No, it was utilization, resource utilization. That's what they pointed out. The number two benefit is actually kind of not on this list. It was reliability. Yeah, I didn't even think to put it on the list. It was reliability, that the underlying infrastructure can die, or parts of it can die, and their application doesn't suffer. And they had noticed a meaningful lack of headache from moving to Kubernetes from whatever they were running on. And then the third one was, in fact, developer productivity. So I think everyone just sort of takes that for granted, that yes, now I can release hundreds of times a day if I want to. I can just do it very quickly. So that was the number three benefit. And then some people also chimed in with the portability multi-cloud, but a little bit less than the other three. So that was interesting.
That's still important.
Nobody said security and isolation. I don't know why. I think that there's a benefit, but anyway. So does anyone have anything to add? As you've used Kubernetes or brought it into your environment, what sort of benefits have you seen?
Any end users here? Yeah, we have one.
Mm-hmm. What kind of things do you understand better now? So you were using the cloud before, but without Kubernetes, and now you brought in Kubernetes, and now you understand the utilization of the networking resources better. Interesting. You understand networking technology better because you've had to do that. Is that why? I see. Okay. Yes. Interesting. What are you doing? Would you say a little bit more about your use case? Reliability. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I see. That's great feedback. I mean, particularly about it being more complicated. I definitely hear that, particularly from folks who are deploying it themselves, either on-prem or in the cloud. And a lot of people are using the managed offerings like GKE, and then it's not so complicated. But I think we still have a lot of work to do as a community to make Kubernetes easier to consume. I kind of touched on a few pieces of that in my keynote this morning, but I think the deployment experience is not something I covered.
Right.
And that is what SIG Cluster Lifecycle is working on. Yeah. I see.
And then it's challenging, yeah?
Right. There's a lot that you have to know. Yeah, you have to understand. Yeah, there's people that love YAML and people that hate YAML. Right. Yeah, it's like. Right. Yes. Right.
Can applications like, can extra tools like Helm, for example, help you with this case?
That's great. Yeah, we didn't. Yeah. Right. And I think that if you, my guess is that if you're using one of the managed services, that your operational efficiency does improve if you had operations to begin with. But if you're managing Kubernetes yourself, like some of the folks here are talking about, you probably just change your operations investment into operating Kubernetes. Yes. Right. And when you get to that scale, then you do. I agree. I think that perhaps the users that we were talking to haven't achieved that scale yet.
That's another thing. I might fall under multi-cloud, but a lot of the, what you might call newspaper class articles about people running Kubernetes tend to talk about scalability. And look what I did with 5,000 nodes. And I'm surprised that didn't make the list either.
Yeah, you know, actually that one, it surprises me less because there's a lot of small clusters. There's a lot of smaller clusters. It's starting though. I mean, you know, Kubernetes is in movement. It's in progress. The transformation is in progress, and so and it's very fast, the change. So we're starting to see a lot more. You know, AI.com, I think they wrote a blog about their 5,000 node cluster, and there's a few others that have 5,000 node clusters. I haven't really seen too many that are larger than that, although there's people that are looking to have larger clusters and potentially span certainly zones, but potentially also regions. And that's kind of a big area of discussion within the Kubernetes project is how should we provide for more scale? You know, should we basically have one very, very, very large cluster, or should we have many clusters? And so there's an entire SIG called SIG multi-cluster, which has you know, been developing technology for managing multiple clusters. And I think for the vast majority of users right now, the paradigm is that you split your applications across multiple clusters. And there's many ways that they split them. I mean, users split it. You know, they have one cluster for test, and then another one for dev, and then another one for you know, production. And another kind of split is they have one cluster per region. They have some clusters on-prem, some clusters in the cloud. They have one cluster or a set of clusters for stateful applications that maybe are on a different version of Kubernetes, and then another set of clusters for stateless applications that they maybe upgrade more frequently. Those are some of the divisions that I have seen in terms of multi-cluster. But then there are some companies that just have kind of like one app or one big app. You know, Niantic, Pokemon Go was like that. And so they don't really need multiple clusters. They just need like a massive cluster. So you get both of those. And then for the multi-cluster one, for the one massive cluster one, the new trend that I'm seeing is that they're a SaaS provider. You know, so WordPress engine, for example, is running a service for WordPress where they host many, many different people's websites. And so they want like a huge cluster with multiple tenants. And this is where the security and isolation and multi-tenancy comes in. So I think technically a very, very exciting time.
So there are enough samples where customers have extremely huge deployments of Kubernetes, but they can achieve that in a different way, like having a single cluster or having multiple small clusters, but so many small clusters.
Sorry, did we address your point? Okay, thank you. All right, what do we want to do next?
So we also had some feedback about what we are missing from Kubernetes and what should we add to our roadmap. Again, it's mostly based on the feedback from the end users and from the consumers of Kubernetes, but here are a few bullet points that we have received from them.
Yeah, the main thing that actually they breezed through this, like there wasn't a lot of, it's like, yeah, customizability is there, resource efficiency is there, security. A lot of requests for greater security and developer-friendly experience and ease of management. Those were the three that came up, and I think probably resonates with all of you as well.
And speaking about security, we have to mention that there's still a big demand from the customers to enhance security in Kubernetes. At the same time, enhancing security in Kubernetes was a big trend for entire Kubernetes community during the last year or 2 years. So enterprise-grade Kubernetes cannot be achieved without some major security features. And for example, RBAC, that was one of the major features in Kubernetes 1.6 that has been presented around a year ago, was the big and major feature bullet point for so many enterprise customers.
So where we're trying to take this work in SIG PM is really talk to more end users and get more feedback about here's the features that are coming from each of the SIGs. What would you like to see? What's your feedback on your current usage of Kubernetes? For example, scalability is a really great question. Like, what level should we scale to? And if we scale to 10,000 nodes, what should be the features within the cluster that customers will be looking for? And what we want to do as a SIG is to take that input and then take it to shape the roadmap of the project, and obviously go to the various SIGs that are working on these topics and say, here's the 10 customers that are looking for this particular feature. Why don't we slot that into one of the 4 releases this year? I think that's all we have.
Yeah.
Yes?
Any other topics to discuss? We have enough time.
Are there folks here that have done open source project management or open source product management that are interested in getting involved? Have ideas?
How much time do you usually dedicate?
Yeah. It really varies. I think that a lot of it is also cycle-based. It's cyclical, depending on where we are in the release cycle. There's a lot of time up front to create that backlog usually, and Ihor does, I think, the vast majority of the work there. Just making sure that every SIG puts their features in, making sure that the features have enough detail, that there's design docs associated with things. Why don't you tell us what you do, all the things
So that usually happens. Again, coming back to the topic of how Kubernetes is released, we are releasing quarterly, we are making 4 releases per year, and the release cycle is approximately 3 months. And the first month is the period that is called pre-feature freeze stage. So at the end of the first month, we have the feature freeze, and until that period of time, all the features have to be finalized and codified in the Kubernetes/features repo. So during the first months, SIGs have to define what they're working on with during this release. And we, as the product managers, we have to work with them on setting the priority, on working with them on which features are important for the market, which features are going to be delivered in this release, or if this SIG has plans to deliver the feature but doesn't have enough bandwidth to do it, we can move it to the next release and so on. So the first months of the release is typically the most active time for the average product manager within the Kubernetes community.
I would say it's probably about 4 or 5 hours per week, but not every single week, but kind of more bunched together around the start of the release and then towards the end of the release. So what we do towards the end of the release, not at the very, very end, but just before the end, is we'll sometimes host some demos to understand the features. We'll start working on the blog post. We'll make sure that there's documentation.
Release notes.
Release notes.
And everything that supports this release, and we have to ensure that these features that have been developed by the technical teams, they will be delivered to the end users in an appropriate way.
And then, there's a bit of a glamour aspect to the SIG in that you can, participate in speaking with reporters about what's in the release, or you can participate in writing about what's in the release. So that takes some time as well. But then there's the longer range kind of planning, which is sort of happens in the background of, speaking to users, gathering feedback, and communicating with the SIGs. Yeah.
Yep.
More people we have, the less time per person. Thank you.
Thank you.